Welcome back to the I Am More Than podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Wessel. I'm a former Miss Arizona USA professional model and founder of More Than Inc. This week is going to be a much different episode than one we've ever brought you before. It's important for me to bring all types of women with unique experiences and backgrounds on this podcast. I've known this guest for over 7 years, and I've watched her incredible transformation. After being a guest on her podcast, I felt like I needed to bring her on this platform so we could share her gifts with all of you. She's taking back the term psychic and talking all about what it means to be an intuitive. We talk about drug addiction, mental health, astrology, the matrix, angels. We covered a lot. She speaks with such conviction, and her journey is absolutely fascinating. Please welcome Elizabeth Erickson. Welcome to the I Am More Than podcast, Liz. I am stoked to have you on the show.
Hello, Jordan. Thank you so much for having me. I am so grateful to be here.
I'm so excited that you're here. And a funny story for everybody listening. I was actually on Liz's podcast on Wednesday, and we ended up talking for 3 hours, and we still have more to talk about.
So much more to talk about.
So I'm so excited that you came on here, and I think it's going to be really exciting for our audience to get to know you, just because I feel like what you stand for, what you're doing in life right now, especially in 2020, is so needed. So I'm excited for people to just get to know your journey and get to know your heart, and I think it's going to be really, really enlightening for a lot of people.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm all about the 2020 wave and how we can ride it. So I'm definitely here for this conversation. I think it'll be great.
Oh, girl, me too. And we met 7 years ago, a little over 7 years ago, which is wild.
So crazy.
And the cool thing about our relationship is I feel like we've both been cheering each other on kind of from the sidelines for those 7 years. Like we've been intertwined in each other's lives.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny knowing how we started because it's so different than where we are now.
Oh my gosh,
for those of you who don't know, we competed at Miss Arizona USA back in 2013.
Yeah, I think so.
Insane. So
Crazy.
From your pageant days to where you are now, give me a little outline about kind of what you went through to get to where you are now.
Oh my goodness. So it has been quite the journey. I feel like I have so many different running stories, and you and I talked about this on my episode, just like so many different stories and journeys that got me to the one point that I'm at now. So it's been quite the ride. But back then oh my gosh, I was such a different person. It's so crazy to like think back to. But yeah, in pageant times, I remember my perspective, like going in, I was like, you know what? I never really got the opportunity to do a lot of hobbies growing up or a lot of like sports or anything on the outside. And so I was like, oh, pageants, easy enough. Like I can figure out how to do that. I can learn how to walk. I've always loved people and loved speaking. And that's something that's been really central to my personality. So I was like, that's a perfect avenue. And at the time, like I was really, really heavily ingrained in my physical image and very much tying that to my worth. So of course, like, competing in a beauty pageant where like you get to be pretty and get to get into the best shape of your life and look the best that you could possibly look in, some standard of what the best looks like. Like I loved that. And it was really validating and exciting at the time, and definitely served me while I did it. But then after that, I was a semifinalist, which I was really proud of because I was like, I've never done anything before. This was the first thing that I ventured out and did. And that was cool for me. And after that, I was given looking back, a confidence from the wrong place. I don't want to call it a false confidence because I was confident, but it was coming from an authentic space, a space of like, oh, I see how much I can change myself to be this version that I would like to be. And that makes me feel good. And that kind of just propelled in through college and really took me down a wild and crazy path that in a lot of ways wasn't very positive or wasn't very good for me. Until I kind of got to where I am now, which was another story. But if you want, I can kind of go into what happened through college because I do think that's like pretty central.
Yeah, absolutely.
To my journey. So I really a lot of people don't know this, but I was actually heavily drug addicted for a long time, and I talk about it when it's necessary, and I'm sure there'll be a space where I really come open about that. But I was addicted to Adderall, and that addiction started to spiral in college and got really, really, really bad and really dark, and led me to a very frantic mental health place, because when you take too much of a stimulant, it is I mean, it's terrible. Like there's a reason why it can lead to psychosis and other problems. And so I started drinking extremely heavily. I mean, I went to a university where that's very much the culture. So I mean, I wasn't doing anything too abnormal, but I always remember being like, everybody else is partying, but I'm on a different level. Like, I'm trying to do more. I started dabbling in other drugs. And by the end of college, I had pretty much been forced to give up on my dream of becoming a surgeon, which I wanted to be a doctor since I was like 14, and was very, very, very adamant on knowing that I wanted to help people and wanted to heal people, and I actually wanted to do like trauma surgery and like help people from extreme. Yeah, I knew I wanted to do something in extreme with how I could help. But I had to let go of that dream because, looking back now, God was like, I will not let you bark up this wrong path. Like, we're going to roadblock you so you can really sit down and think about this and make sure this is the right thing. And sure enough, it wasn't. And so I gave up on that dream. And then my senior year, I remember things started going wrong, like with the Adderall that I was taking, and that being like really, I started to have a lot more mental health problems. I was having panic attacks multiple times a day. I was like leaving work in the middle of doing things at work to just go cry in the bathroom and have a hyperventilate, have a panic attack, come back to work. And then I started losing a ton of weight. And I was like, something is really wrong. Like, I'm 106 pounds. What the heck? And I had a lymph node in my throat that was really, really like rock hard. And one of my siblings had cancer in the thyroid like 2 years before. So I was like, oh, great. Like, I mean, there's a lymph node and I'm losing weight and I'm having all these panic attacks. Like, something is seriously wrong. And this is a crazy story. I remember feeling called to share my symptoms with a customer at work, because I was working in retail at the time, which, of course, if anybody knows, it's pretty not appropriate to like talk about your health problems to a random stranger in a professional setting. But I just felt like inclined to share with her. And so I did. And she said, I think you might have an Epstein-Barr virus infection, which is the same virus as mono. But she was like, and I think, you're having a reactivation. If so, I have a lady, and she's the only woman in the valley who will be able to help you with this problem. If this is what you have, here's her number. And so I took a picture of this little sticky note she wrote for me, and I just forgot about it. And then a few months later, my panic attacks were again really so bad. Like, I'm talking like I developed serious trauma from this time that I have still had to heal, which has been wild. And I finally was like, maybe I should like call that lady, that practitioner that I was told about. So I find it and I call her. And sure enough, I had an Epstein-Barr viral infection that was 2.5 times the rate what the immunoglobulin response should be for someone who's formerly had mono. So if you get mono, they say you can't have it happen again, but there is very rare cases where it can be triggered to reactivate, and the numbers were way out of whack. And kind of long story short of why I had gotten sick, there was mold in my house at the time in our basement that we didn't know about. Yeah. And all the drug use, all of the not taking care of my body. I mean, I would wake up, take my Adderall, drink coffee, smoke my Juul, not eat till like 3 p.m, like have a terrible sleep schedule. Of course, my body was just praying for an illness. Yes. Yeah. I was really, getting there. And so the funny part is I really, truly in hindsight believe that woman was an angel, because she wrote her name down, and this practitioner was like, I've never met this person. She's not a client of mine. And she had told me like, oh yeah, I've been seeing this woman. And I'm thinking back, I'm like, I know that was a divine thing where God was like intercepting. Yeah. And that leads me. Yeah. And I didn't know that this is the story of how my spirituality was going to really open up. And so I had to move back home. I had to totally uproot my entire life. Through that process of healing my body, I was led to going vegan. And I totally think for anyone who's struggling with really intense health problems that like raw vegan cleanses are incredible. Obviously now, like long-term wise, that didn't end up working out to do it in the capacity I was, but it really started to change things for me. I started to at least notice some detoxing symptoms, but the illness wasn't going away. And that was where I was starting to get really fearful a couple months in of like, okay, I'm on this medication. I'm doing all these holistic practices to put my body back into alignment. Why am I not getting healthier all the way? And so I kept gambling with it. Yeah, I kept gambling with it and trying to think like, oh, well, maybe if I, try this new thing or that new thing, it'll get better. And then also saying to myself, like, let me try going back to work prematurely. And that every time I was shot down. And there was this one point where this really kind of reached the peak where I was getting ready for work one day, totally shouldn't have been working. I did not feel good. My boss was like, hello, are you even present? Because I wasn't able to think cognitively. I had such bad brain fog. I was getting ready. I was making a smoothie using a butter knife to cut apart these frozen bananas. And I sliced my tendon in my finger and had to get a surgery to reattach my tendon and have 3 months of rehab on my pinky finger.
Girl, this is the perfect storm.
Right. It was so like I sat down and I was just like, are you freaking kidding me? Like sure, my illness might get better. I can't use my hand for 3 months, like the way I'm supposed to use my hand. And I had to get a surgery. Like it was not a small, I thought it was just like, oh, I'll just go get stitches, but I couldn't bend my finger. And if anyone's ever had that surgery, it's gnarly, it takes like 8 different things in your finger to just bend it. Yeah. And so I remember really, really breaking down at that time. And that was when my suicidal thoughts started to creep back in, which I had struggled with in high school, but had numbed myself out of and didn't have to face. And I also had to go sober at this point. I forgot to mention that. So I had to stop taking all the drugs. I had to stop doing all the things. And through that, those thoughts creeped back in. And I remember like laying in the shower multiple days. I'm a water sign, so the shower is a very therapeutic space for me. I remember like laying in there and just being like, if I'm going to have to be sick for the rest of my life and I can't use my brain function, I can't speak to my friends, I can't show up for life. Like, I don't want to be here. Like, why would I want to stay for this? And I had no purpose. I didn't believe in really God that much at that point. I just didn't have any grounding. I had 0 point of being here because I wasn't connected to here and here being my life. And I called my mom, and I love my mom so much because she is truly a prayer warrior, someone who's very, very, very spiritual. And I called her and I just broke down and I was like, Mom, like, I can't do this anymore. I don't, I don't want to scare you, but like, this sucks. And I'll never forget, she said to me, maybe God is just trying to get you to start trusting him instead of yourself. And I sat there and I was like, wow, that's pretty profound. I mean, I'm already on the brink of wanting to end my life. What else do I have to lose besides like honestly giving him a shot? And so it wasn't coming from a place of like, sure, yes, 100%. It was coming from a place of like, I'm so desperate that this is my last hurrah. And if this doesn't work, then, whatever, I'll leave. And that day, I have a medical intuitive in my family, which I'll probably have to explain later. But basically, this person is able to see inside of bodies as if they were an MRI. So they can see like blackness where there's illness. They can see like different dark things. So it's usually, it looks like an MRI or an X-ray. It's all black and white. And this time I was asking them to evaluate my body, as this person did every day. And I'm trying to keep it anonymous just because not my entire family is willing to share about their gifts yet. But they put their hands on my head and literally pulled them off in shock. Like, oh my gosh, like their hands jumped and they said, I have never seen this before in anybody. And I've been looking at people for years, health wise. There is a bright glowing star inside of your head. And I just
What?
started crying because I knew what it was. It was like, I knew it was God. I knew there was no other explanation. And it's making me emotional right now because like, I just knew in my very soul, like that was the reason that I had suddenly like wanted to be here again, and that I had really invited him in because we have a choice, you know. We have a choice whether we choose God or we don't. You know, he's never going to force us to come to him. And I decided to come to him and he said, "All right, it's done." And within, I kid you not, about a week or 2 weeks, I was completely better. No symptoms, never had another symptom again, and was like restored to perfect health.
Girl, I'm speechless. And I
Yeah.
have goosebumps and so many questions.
Yeah. I don't blame you.
Wow.
It was a lot for me to process too, because I was like, you know, I went from no spiritual practice to like, okay, now what? Now you just healed me. Now what do I do? Like, I guess I start living for you, but what does that look like? Like, what am I supposed to, you know, like, what's my next step? So, yeah, I was just as confused as you and probably everyone listening is, that it was so shocking.
That's amazing.
Hmm.
And did you grow up religious? Did you grow up spiritual? What was your idea of God prior to this experience?
Yeah, well, that's funny you ask that because that's actually probably the most central piece of like one of the most central pieces of my life's journey. I grew up in an extremely strict Christian environment. There's been some claims made about the church that I grew up in being a cult. And I've, you know, worked through my own devotion that it's not important whether I label it as such or not, but there are people who would call it that. And it was very, very, very intense. You know, obviously purity culture is normal in Christian practice, but this was to another level. Like people, it was like prized in the church to not kiss until you were married. Um, there were people that were homosexual living in heterosexual relationships and, you know, preaching that to the church as the way to do things. And it was very like, if you didn't show up for all the things you had to show up for, it was like, why are you not performing for God essentially? And if you aren't, like, people in the church will take away your status as a disciple or a Christian in that church. So my view of God was so terrifying, so terrifying. I mean, like I had moments like, you know, when I lost my virginity where I just was like, I am absolutely ruined. There is no other option. What is the point? You know, I'm dirty. And through that process I had in my teens, when I got to college and I was 18, because it was common, this church made all children attend every single church thing. It was more important to go to church than it was to go to school, like even if I was sick. So like literally the day of my 18th birthday, I was like, I'm free, I'm out. And I became atheist for a couple years because I was so like, if that's the way to heaven, then get me out of there. Like, I don't want anything to do with that. It was so abusive, which is very normal for a lot of people. They have a really bad experience and then they're like, okay, well, I can't love God, or they become agnostic because they're like, I don't understand why God would be so awful, you know? So yeah, and I think that separation through college is why I stopped taking care of myself, is why I let the darker voices take over. It's why I just kind of, you know, fell apart essentially.
Well, it makes sense too. I mean, when you're raised around that and you think that that's the only way that people that have this quote unquote relationship with God, that's how they have to live, of course you'd be
Yeah,
fear, you know?
absolutely.
That's a total fear tactic.
Hmm.
And I'm interested that if you went through that atheist phase and then welcome God back into your life, and then you have this healing, I don't even know what to call it, miracle, really.
Hmm.
After experiencing something like that, did it automatically change your view of God and what your faith looks like, or did it take some time?
I love that question. It really took some time, and I think that's important. Like, one thing I really try to tell people about through my page and my information is like, be really patient with yourself when light starts coming in, because God is light. And I find it to be more understandable to look at it as light versus dark as opposed to God versus Satan, even though, they're all the same thing. But as light starts to come into you more, and a lot of people are waking up right now. So for anyone listening, if you've been having a lot of crazy stuff going on and you're suddenly seeing things differently, you are not crazy. It's very normal. There are people that are turning on like that right now. So with that, it's so important to be gentle, because it takes a long time to detach from your programming about God, because there's so many layers, especially if you've been raised with religion. There is so many layers. And so I kind of bounced back and forth. Like the first and only thing I knew was that God was real, and that God healed me, and that God could work miracles. And that was the first basis that I had. And I think, to be honest, even where I'm at now, that's really all that matters is that that God is love, and that through the power of God and the light, that anything can be accomplished. I think that's really all that matters. But I had to really work, because it was like, okay, well, what now? Do I have to go back to church? And I did think about that for a while. I went to like one or two services, and that still didn't feel right, because I was like, okay, well, maybe I, have woken up enough now that, and I'm obviously not doing drugs anymore. Maybe I can start following the Bible to a T again, like I was raised to do. And maybe I can go back to that, find my sweet Christian man, wait till marriage, have our kids, raise them in the church, and blah, blah, blah. But that didn't feel right either. And so that kind of began this really tumultuous process of me like going through my old beliefs and working through each one and recognizing my individual truth and how I actually felt about them. Because I'm never going to say matter of factly anything about our texts or our teachings, but I will say to check every single thing with your heart, because the darkness is everywhere, and it's very advantageous for the darkness to poison our very places where we learn from God, and that is the church, and that is the doctrines that we look to. So, yeah, I really had to work through that. And since my individual spiritual gifts have started to develop, I've had some psychic attacks and some experiences where that programming tries to come back and be like, and fear monger me into thinking I'm doing everything wrong. And I've now
Yeah.
finally, yeah, it's scary, but I finally am at the conviction now where I know what I'm doing is right, because I actually now have a conviction in my heart. And if you don't have that, you are susceptible to any religion, any person, any teacher, basically hijacking your system and telling you to live for a different thing. But really, if you take that time to be in your heart, like that is where you get that truth, and then nothing can shake you from there. But it takes that patience with yourself to work through each belief and sit with it lovingly and be kind to yourself, because hello, if you were told something at 3 years old, starting then throughout your whole hypnotic state as a child, it's going to be really deep to purge that. So yeah, it was not an overnight process, and I'm glad I went through it in a difficult way so that now I can help advise people a little bit away from that, because it took longer than it should. But I'm super grateful now, because I'm solid, like I'm rock solid in where I stand, and I'm becoming fearless against speaking out against what I don't believe in anymore, which took also a really long time.
Yeah, that's really cool, especially when what you've been raised around is to be fearful of basically everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why a lot of people really struggle with religion. And to be completely honest, I struggle with religion in the same sense, because I feel like religion it's kind of man made.
It is.
And there's a set of rules. And if you don't follow these rules, then you don't get to heaven, and God wants nothing to do with you, is basically the premise of religion.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I'm wondering, do you think that there is a difference between being a religious person and a spiritual person? If so, what is that difference?
Oh, magic question. I think there is a world of difference. And I know some religious people hate that. They really don't like that concept. But actually, yes, I truly believe that in a majority of the churches, and obviously I don't know for sure, but I would be willing to bet that 90% of the people are not spiritually connected at all. They're being fed something that fits their desire to be spiritual and is kind of shutting that desire, or it's like distracting that desire so that they like you feel like you're being spiritual. And of course, I can only speak from my own experience and observation. So, for anyone listening, I'm not necessarily speaking towards your experience, with yourself. But it's very common that religious has tried to fill our void for us with a religion instead of allowing us to fill our void with God. And I think when you become spiritual, you're filling all voids with God, and you are becoming in line with your spirit, and not just, running to the church to repent, or running to the church because you don't feel good. Or just using sermon for those things. When you are spiritual, you understand that your soul is within your body having an experience and that it comes from God. But being active with spirituality means that you are conscious of your evolution of your soul, which I found that religion didn't fit that or fix that problem at all, because it was kind of this idea of like, okay, every Sunday I go to church and I just dump all my crap at God's, foot. And then the next week I go screw up again, and then I come dump it all again, and he saves me every time. And it's like, we are not so weak that that's how it's supposed to look. I really have started to learn that it's more about God wants to work through you on a day-to-day basis. And through that is purifying you of the darkness that you carry. And within churches, there is darkness, because that's the agenda, is to infiltrate those spaces. So of course, and that's why I think when people get really heavily religious, they're at very high risk for their spirituality to be shut off or manipulated. So again, there is people that are both, but I think it's not talked enough about how many people that are religious aren't spiritual at all. Just knowing that you're a soul is not really what it is. It's being conscious of how your soul is evolving and experiencing itself.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's much more relationship based, because you said something very interesting earlier where you said that it's your choice. God never basically forces himself on you or forces that relationship. It's a choice. Can you talk a little bit about what that means, especially if somebody doesn't know the God that we are talking about?
Yes, I love that. So what I've really understood, and I think this is a good time to share this, something that really helped me to get confirmation about what I was already intuitively gathering from my relationship with God. There's a book called Conversations with God, and it was written by Neil Donald Walsh. And he is a channel, like I am a channel, where he started writing one day and God took over the pen. And that happens sometimes. And it's really freaky for the channel because you're like, what's going on? But he basically wrote 3 books of God explaining, everything. And I will not, I'm not going to say this book is like the end all be all, because of course it's up to each person to hear the information and run it through their heart and see how they feel about it, because it might be true for you and not for me, or vice versa. But that book really explains it nicely, that God wanted to create us just for the simple fun of creation. And we are sovereign in our ability to decide what we do while we are here. Now, we can choose either side of the spectrum. He himself is light, and the opposite of him is dark. And we are in a world excuse me, of polarity. And that polarity is the contrast of the dark and light. So when we come down here, we have the freedom to experience all of those things. And I've truly let go and released my belief in what everybody else would understand to be hell. I believe the hell is a place. I believe a lot of people are actually already living in it and they're not even dead. I think that hell is just the concept of ultimate separation. And what really healed me is understanding that I don't believe that God damns us anywhere. I believe that if we have free will, if that is to be true, which I believe that to be true, then why would our ultimate journey be decided for us? I think that we choose to go away from God, and in that is our hell. Now that's kind of an abstract concept that takes some time to sit through, and I've sat with it. So that's why I feel comfortable sharing. But I believe that sovereignty, that ability to govern our own lives, to govern our own connection to ourself and our own connection to the divine, is the biggest gift he could have given us, to say, I love you, but because I created you in my image, I trust you enough that you can go live this life, and that you will find your way to me when you are ready, if you so choose, and that I love you if you choose not to have it. And I think that sits and aligns with the concept that God is just pure love, which is really my only main spiritual belief. Is just God is pure love. So for people who haven't, been told about Christianity or religion or anything or any sort of form of God, I just think he created us and that he's love, and that's really it. And through that process of us having our own choice, we get to go wherever we want. And so when I decided to trust him, I committed to having him work within me. And I think, the rules and how you choose to live, again, is all up to you. You can choose to conduct your life in a way that would fit some biblical principles. And I think you can also live your life in a way that doesn't fit those principles and still have your own relationship, because again, comes back to your free will. So you choose your journey, and that's really threatening to some religions, because I just said something that is, many would disagree upon. But through my own conversations with him myself and what I felt in my heart, that is really, kind of where I've fallen. And it also makes sense that if he's pure love, that, he would support us doing, having the experience that he designed us to have, if that kind of answers your question.
No, it definitely does. And I think the most amazing part about even just hearing you talk, and obviously you had said that this is a conviction in your heart, and you can hear that in your speech. You can tell that this is something that not only you truly, truly believe, but you're also living out. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to take a second to just recognize that that's within, the last 3 years?
Yeah.
That you've really transformed your life because you chose to let God in. Mm-hmm. And you've talked about the fact that you have gifts, and that's a whole nother part of this conversation that I have so many questions about, because I know you've talked about your family having them at the same time. What do you mean when you say that you have these gifts? What does that mean to you?
Oh, I love it. So I believe that we all have gifts to certain degrees, just kind of like personalities. Some of us are a little bit more of this, some are a little bit more of that, but I believe that we all have intuitive spiritual abilities. And actually, certain doctrines of religion were written by people who had abilities. So my gifts, for anyone who knows about psychic things, I am clairaudient, clairsentient, and claircognizant. So clairaudient means I can hear. That's the gift that I'm working on developing the most. I'm a baby in that arena. And then clairsentience and claircognizance. Sentience is feeling, which is what most people would consider being an empath. And then claircognizance is just a knowing. And those two I've had since the beginning of time. And I didn't really know what they were. And I love discovering this because actually a lot of people are out here wandering around extremely psychic with no idea and thinking that they have problems or mental health issues because they're actually just very clairsentient or very claircognizant, and that doesn't fit along with the status quo, rigid box that our society has created for what's normal for a human to experience. People that debate that inner dialogue thing, that is 100% a psychic thing. How some people are like, I don't hear thoughts in my head, I just kind of they're there. Those are different experiences of claircognizance, and then also some just really wide open psychic channels getting different thoughts. So for me, what I'm able to do with people that I'm helping is I can feel into their energy and I can feel what's going on. And I can also feel what's going on in the lives of people connected to them. So if someone comes to me for a love reading, I can feel into what's going on with their partner, and the energy that's present. And then I will just get through my claircognizance these knowings of what they either need to hear, and basically what their soul is telling them. And then my other gift is that I'm a channel. So I can, and I've done this a few times. I don't do it all the time because I have a lot of reverence for it, but I can, through pen and paper, channel God, and get messages from him, like actual words, which is really cool. And if anyone has that gift or is thinking about having that gift, be very gentle and very protected when you start playing with that, just because you want to make sure you're working with the right energies. So yeah, I have those, and yeah, I guess that's all I have to say on it, unless you have some questions, because
Wow.
I know there is so
I
much to
have
unpack. Yeah.
5 million questions here for you.
Yeah.
So, when you say psychic, I
Mm-hmm.
know that we have a idea of what that means in our
Yes.
Western culture. When you
Mm-hmm.
say psychic, you're referring to basically just being an intuitive. Am I
Mm-hmm.
right on that?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Okay. So, a psychic, do you think that somebody is born a psychic? Why has it been taken into the context that we know of being a psychic as somebody that is not associated with God? Why do you think that there's been a separation there?
Juicy, incredible question. I love that one because that really answers one of my life's biggest questions. Because, like, I'll be frank, there is a lot of shame for people with intuitive gifts in like the Christian religion I grew up in. There's a lot of that, a lot of like, you're consulting demons, this is wrong. But there's also a lot of scripture in the Bible about our gifts, that we do have gifts, that even instances with healing where Jesus has said, like, you can have my abilities if you believe in my Father, and I think, and this again is abstract, I don't have any, documented evidence on this, but if you think about it, what would be the most advantageous way to continue feeding people a certain line of truth, other than shutting off their very ability to talk to God themselves? So if we tell everyone that you cannot communicate with God like that, that if you do, you're communicating with demons, that's a terrifying thing to tell somebody. Then how beautiful would it be that they could all live in this state where they are only listening to you and not listening to God talk to them in their heart? And that's one thing from conversations with God that I loved, is he said, you guys are more concerned about the expression of me through written word and spoken word than you are through your own experience of me. And you guys, he's like, I'm talking to you constantly. I give you feelings throughout the day. I give you chills when something is true. I show you a bird on your windowsill when you're looking for an answer. But we reject those things because we were told, like, hey, that's bad. So again, I could be wrong. I totally could be wrong. But my true conviction here is that throughout history, people were tortured, demonized, oppressed, and frankly, I mean, way worse than that, by dark beings, because they win turning these gifts off. Because if you have these gifts, you can heal the world. Like, if I can help someone figure out why their relationships are failing, or, if I could help someone figure out that something happened to them in the womb that has been causing them all their suicidal thoughts their entire life. If I could do that, someone can connect to God a lot easier, because they can't connect to God when they're trapped in depression and misery. It's really hard because you're vibrationally low. So a manipulation of our vibrations to keep us in this low, like sleeping, shut off from God's state, is extremely financially, spiritually, and all kinds of ways advantageous for the darker energies. So I truly believe that it's become a construct. And I also, part of my family that is not my blood family has a connection to very occult spiritual people. And obviously, there has been people that have practiced black magic, white magic. There's a good and a bad of every single thing on this planet. And these people were pure and of the light and were completely tortured and oppressed because of it. So I think that's where the negative connotation comes from. And then, of course, our media hilariously makes these shows like That's So Raven or Wizards of Waverly Place to show us like, oh, that's all fantasy, and if someone does claim to do that, they're crazy or they're, wrong, or they're just like, fortune telling and, regarding psychics as so simple that they would just sit here to tell the future. Like most intuitives, it's not even their work at all. Like I'm helping people with things like suicidal thoughts. I'm not busy here talking about whether you're going to get a boyfriend in 2 months, So I think it's just been an overall just like discredibility. So it's really important to me to reclaim that word and to take it back and to say, no, there may be a stigma about this, but I'm going to take this and infuse the light and love into it, which is what it was meant to be. And yes, we are all born psychic, I believe. That's why, sometimes kids will talk about things we have never heard them talk about before, or they'll have imaginary friends, or they'll see things in their closet. We all have, abilities again to some degree, and I believe we're born with them, and then we turn them off because we're told, oh no, that's not real. You can't see that. No way. There's nothing in your closet, sweetie. You're crazy. Or telling people like, yeah, you're crazy. You just hear voices in your head. And yeah, so just overall, I think our society has been carefully designed by things that were not God to shut us off, shut us down. Because if that happens, then we don't evolve. And then we live in enslavement to the dark, which is, kind of what hell was described as. So yeah, kind of a long answer on that one, but
interesting. Yeah. But it's so interesting. And I don't even know how to properly phrase this question, but I think you'll get the gist of what I mean. That when people talk about why it gets this dark, negative connotation, and people talk about seeing darkness or demonic things or anything like that, is it that those demonic things or whatever they are present in our world that most people are not seeing? Do you think that people are also seeing, like you said, you believe that woman was an angel? Do you think that there's angels here? There's just stuff we're not seeing physically here?
Angel energies around you all the time. Angels can come through all kinds of things. Like if you're randomly seeing a bunch of the same coin, or if you're randomly seeing angel numbers, 111, 222, 333, or even seeing like my angel numbers are different. Like I see 747 a lot, 1144. You'll just start to kind of notice, or like little feathers floating in the air, or sometimes like a little butterfly comes to you at a random time, as you're lost in thought. It's funny, I looked up and I see 4444 right now as I'm looking at the time. How hilarious, as I'm literally talking about angels. They're actually, the number of the angels is 444, or any combination of a ton of fours, and how interesting. And I saw that as I'm answering the question, that they're even here right now. So yeah, they're around you all the time. And they speak very subtle. They speak very quietly because, again, like, that's where the free will comes in. If any energy is ever really in your face and is really, pushing for you to go a certain way, don't listen to that energy. God and the angels will always respect your choice and your ability to come to them and your ability to make your own decisions. So that's kind of how to distinguish the difference. I always say, know your heart, have a good connection with your heart, because it will never lie to you. It cannot lie to you. And then also, knowing if a spirit is reaching out to me, test it and be like, ask it if it is of the light. And also, make sure if it is not respecting your free will, that is not something that you should, mingle with. But I don't even want to freak you guys out, because it's likely that that's not really going to happen to a ton of people unless your gifts like really, snap on and wake up.
And when you talk about these angels, do you believe that it's angels does each individual person have different ones, and are those loved ones that have passed on? Who deciphers who those angels are?
Yeah, so I'm not super versed in those energies, but what I have come to understand is there's angels for everyone, like Archangel Michael, Archangel Gabriel, Uriel, Shamuel. Those are ones that anybody can use. And then we have our own individual angels, and then we also have spirit guides, which can be loved ones who have passed on. They could be other souls that, are possibly in heaven that have just volunteered to help watch over us and give us loving messages. And a lot of us have at least a couple hundred. So if you feel ever like you are alone, there is possibly up to 300 beings in the light realm that are supporting you, that are there to listen and watch over you. They're the ones that are kind of, if you're ever like going to take a certain road and you're like, no, I should probably take this other road. Those are the beings that are like kind of giving you that little weighing on your heart to keep you safe. So yeah, like I think, we all have the universal ones and then our individual ones. And that's where it becomes really comforting, is to know that like you're never alone. You can pick up the phone spiritually and talk to anybody. And I think God offers us those other energies just because there's an abundance of him, and he's working through all of them. And there's some that help you through certain transitions of life. I also have heard that you have one main guide or angel that is with you throughout your entire life. And so, yeah, we all have them. We can all tap into them. And if you're ever interested in, connecting to them more, you can ask them for an individual sign. You can say, hey, I'm, wondering about this situation. And if this is true, if I'm on the correct path, please show me X, Y, and Z, whatever comes to your mind. I've, asked for signs as silly as like, please show me a sheep somewhere. And then literally the next day, this mom is with her daughter on an iPad. The mom's like, what sound does the sheep make? And the baby's like, bah. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, they will answer. They will always reveal if you are seeking that confirmation. So that's kind of a cool way to get in touch. But yeah, it's super magical to know we all have so many that are supporting us.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And going back to just some of your individual gifts, and I know that you had talked in the very beginning about how you had wanted to be a surgeon because you knew you wanted to help people.
Mm-hmm.
And with the gifts that you have now, do you have the abilities of being able to help anybody? Does it ever come to you when somebody's not asking, or is it like a very individualized? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I love that. It's really funny for me because I do get messages when I'm talking to people and they're not asking. And that has been a little training process I went through in the beginning, because I would just like offer someone a reading that wasn't like super down. And it ended up either kind of triggering a part of their ego where it didn't resonate, or like they didn't appreciate it or something. So I've kind of had to learn, like, I will get messages, and just like the spirits, I need to ask for consent from the other individual if they want to hear the message. So I'll hear stuff and say, hey, like, I'm hearing something, that maybe you should like check out this book. And I always, follow up with, but of course, like only if that resonates in your heart too, because I, as a channel, am only as good as the framework which I run the message through. So when I'm delivering a message, it's only as good as my cognitive understanding of life in the world. So that's where resonance comes in. There are people that I have read for that I have been like, I don't really think I should read for them again, because just like, when you really vibe with someone, that's energy resonance. Like, I felt like our energies didn't vibe, and I could end up, saying things in a way that didn't really mean what they were supposed to for that person. So, with my own work, yeah, I definitely am able to help when the person and I, are in energy resonance with a lot of things that they're going through, and get messages when they need them. But again, I also try to be really careful, which is why I don't just coach anybody, or I don't just read for anyone, which is also a really good sign to check with if a person that you're going to for spiritual advice is like super accommodating of everything. I would sit with that for a second. Not that it's always a bad thing, but just, because sometimes, not everybody's gonna be able to feel into what you need for that moment, or you're not always going to kind of be on the same vibrational plane.
So interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm learning so much. Oh my goodness, my brain.
No, it's so out there.
Yesterday, it is, but you speak with such conviction that you can't help but understand that obviously this is stuff that you've experienced on multiple occasions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because of just the way that you can convey a message. And yesterday, I thought it was really interesting when we first had started talking and you asked me what my sign was. and like you knew all about astrology and what a Virgo was and everything. Is that connected in any way? Because I know sometimes you refer to the universe. And from my very limited understanding with astrology, is that connected into being spiritual, or are those separate?
I think they're connected, but I've definitely met astrologers that didn't connect the two. I think my understanding of astrology is really just like energies that are present. So it's always funny to me when people don't believe in astrology, and I totally respect it because it comes from not knowing. But it's funny because when we look at the moon moves the whole entire ocean 2 times a day. That's the moon, all right? And the moon is not even a planet. Think about if that can do that. I'm sure it would not be of any. It would make all the sense in the world for Venus to do something, for Mars to do something. So basically, each of those planets holds an energy. Everything holds an energy. And so when you're born, it's just a stamp of where those energies were, how intense they were, within what placement they were at. So energy has an expression of itself. It has a light and dark expression. So I can take the same quality. So say Virgos can be very organized. That can make some Virgos like overly OCD. And then some of them have a natural knack for like bringing organization when we need it, and it really serving us. But then obviously you can see those two. One of those could be really positive, and one of those could be negative for the Virgo. So I think that when you look at it like that, like how can I be the highest version of myself? How can I be the highest vibrational expression of my energies? Then astrology can be super spiritual. Because if I'm focusing on like being the best Scorpio, then I'm not going to be one of those Scorpios who's manipulating people and destroying relationships to get what I want, which is something that some bad Scorpios can do. I can be focused on transformation and the evolution of my soul and evolving those around me, which is what I think that I, try to do as a Scorpio. So yeah, I think it totally ties in. But, be wary. There's definitely astrologers out there who don't see it as such and are just like, Capricorns suck. And I just don't believe that. Like everybody can be good or bad depending on how they try to live their life. So yeah, I think they're totally, totally intertwined.
And another thing that I've heard you bring up in the past is you've talked about the matrix. Can you explain what that means?
Ooh, that's juicy.
Does it have to do with astrology? Is the matrix and astrology hand in hand, or are those completely two separate things?
Well, it's interesting because I think astrology explains some of the matrix and explains what's going on in the matrix right now. But I don't think it necessarily like dictates it. But the matrix is what you could just really call society. But the idea behind there being, or behind the matrix, is that there's kind of an agenda to it, which I wholeheartedly believe. I mean, we all sit around and talk about how a lot of people who have their undergraduate degrees feel useless and aren't able to make any money. And that in itself is a construct of the matrix, because why are we told to go do something that we will not be able to make money without, and then we do it, and then we're still not all making money, or not in an equal playing field? Or why is there racism? Why is there poverty? Why are countries in debt? Why is our news manipulated? And it's because there is this, of course, it's still a theory, this idea that there are people with agendas. Now, my main goal is to stay neutral. I'm supposed to stay neutral and I'm supposed to tell the truth. That is my imprint as a soul here. So I will never tell anyone which way to go or what to believe. But I think it's been constructed to make us all live in a certain way. I mean, we're told what to eat. Advertising tells us how to live, how to think. And we all, as a general collective, are all pretty unhappy. So it just goes to show that, like, if that is their goal, it was pretty darn well accomplished, and they don't seem to be changing their trajectory. I mean, why do us as humans have to make an uproar to end racism? Why do we shouldn't have to do that if it wasn't inherently dark, So it's basically this concept that there is darkness that has infiltrated our society and designed it to be dark and designed it to be a shit show, for lack of a better word, as it is. And it really doesn't want us to change. So that's kind of why I think everything else on other layers is orchestrated as well. It's really you're kind of shamed if you go off the beaten path. You're kind of shamed if you don't want to put your kids in school. It's like, why don't you do that? Well, what if you see the abuse that the system has to offer and you want to save your child from that? Then suddenly you're called, wacky, or like that's you're going to raise a weird kid, or maybe you're just not going to raise a programmed kid. That's really what that's about, because you know if we look at how much we know of life in the world, how much of it has to do with what we've picked up? How much of it has to do with what we've been told and taught, and not from what we've naturally known within our hearts? Which is why kids have to be, essentially stripped of their identities and authenticity in order to survive here. And then they're medicated if it doesn't work. So there's so much to that. It's funny because I actually haven't even seen the movie The Matrix, which people tell me to watch all the time. But it's something that I've always known as a kid. I've always known as a kid that the system was whack, even when I was like 5. Like, I was just woke to it. And I think it's because part of my work is being a truth teller, as much as like it really, it makes me nervous. I don't ever want to step on toes because I'm so empathic and I know how people can get upset. But I also am here to just tell that. And, it's up to everyone else whether they want to, also consume that content and believe that, or, if they don't. So
Is it man-made or is that demonic?
Yeah, I would say it's both, actually. I think it's dark energy working through man and kind of hijacking their software, which is why we look at a lot of higher up people and we're like, why are these people so unempathetic? Why don't they care? Why don't they care that they're hoarding the world's wealth and that all these people are suffering and dying? Like, when we could fix this, why do they have the cure to cancer and they're not telling us? And humans by nature, I also posted about this today on my Instagram, about original sin being a program, that we are inherently bad. I do not believe we are inherently bad. I believe we are inherently good. We come straight from heaven right when we get here, and we're pure, and then we are stripped, which is why children are pure. And through that process, there is no natural reasoning why we would not care, why we would not be empathetic, why we would not want good for all of humanity. Kids tend to be really loving. And obviously, we can look at a playground and there's some kids that aren't loving. Well, they're, who are they being raised by is something we have to take into account. But a kid's natural desire is just to be loved and love another. And when we look at the men and women in the society and we're like, why don't you guys have that natural programming? It's because something else has a programming that's in them. So, if we wanted to get really deep, I believe a lot of celebrities are actually completely hijacked demonically, and not all of them. But I mean, that's why this is all able to be orchestrated so perfectly, so perfectly in a terrible direction, and very hard to break out. You have to get a whole generation of people to create some uproar to get some change around here. So yeah, I think it's these darker energies that have a really strong hold on these people, that are causing them to make these choices that don't serve humanity, because it is not our human nature to hurt one another, to be in war, and of course, there's been some male figures that I know that have been like, whoa, that's so kumbaya of you. And I'm like, actually, it's just my human nature and it's just God. The reason you think it's kumbaya is because the Matrix has said that all of those qualities are bad for us. So yeah, again, short answer, I do think that it is dark energy working through humans, which is really sad, but makes perfect sense, because why would somebody want to be evil? Nobody wants to do that. Mm-hmm.
Now, how you had said that demonic can kind of take over a person and control some of their actions.
Mm-hmm.
Can that happen if the individual is spiritual and has a relationship with God?
It can, if they make the choice to invite those things in. And you'll kind of know if this were to happen. I've known some religious people in my life growing up in the church that I believe have very, very dark energy around them at all times, that keeps them from really advancing a lot emotionally, spiritually, and, physically as well. So yeah, that definitely can happen. But if you have that relationship with your heart, if you are always being aware and attentive, I truly believe that you won't be strayed far. I myself, the lighter I've gotten, the more I have started to work with the light, the more the dark knows about me. And that's something I have to bravely walk through. Like I've had psychic attacks and my dreams happen, and I very well could have invited them in if I had chosen. But again, it's all a free will thing. They have to get your permission. So if you are not giving that permission, if every single time you are feeling a little weird, you're feeling a little suspicious, and you're calling on God, Jesus Christ, Archangel Michael, whatever you feel most safe with, if you are communicating with that and staying in your heart, I think you're completely safe, like beyond safe, because again, those energies are actually scared of us. That's why they need to like flirt with us and manipulate us. So yeah, just staying in your heart. I always like to say, like, there is no fear. Fear is an illusion. So if you're feeling the fear, it's probably something else. And just through prayer, just through go out and be in the sun, go put your feet in the grass, take some time to be quiet. Like you can always go back to your center and your place of power and withstand anything, because we're interfacing with darkness on a regular basis. You could be talking to someone possessed at the grocery store who's checking you out, so it's just about remembering that we are stronger, we are bigger, God is bigger than all of those things. And if we are being conscious, we're completely safe.
Like mind-blowingly interesting.
Right? I mean, it was
like letting it soak in. It's just interesting because it's stuff that I haven't thought of before.
Right.
And so much of it makes so much sense, but it's just a whole other layer that I don't think a lot of people tap into, that level of spirituality or that level of realization of what can be happening around you beyond what we can see.
And we're so scared to do so. Like we're told like that we're gonna, either be possessed or burn in hell if we even look in this direction. And that actually keeps us in the bad place. Like, because that is a place of fear, right? Like we are capable of interacting and handling all of this. God designed us with that armor of gold, but there's, I think there's a reason it's been so kept in the dark for so long. And now is the only time in history where a psychic or a mystic can come out without getting like literally burned at the stake. So it's like, it's kind of a no wonder why we haven't known about it, because prior to my awakening, I would have laughed at anyone trying to tell me about this stuff. I would have been like, that is a bunch of hocus pocus, get out of my face. And now that I've seen it and experienced it myself, I'm like, well, first of all, I have my own conviction because I've it's almost tangible for me, but I totally understand why it takes that time to process. And for anyone listening, like definitely give yourself the space to kind of breathe out this information, because it's, it's intense to learn about like matrix stuff too, especially, and be like, this is all a lie, so I totally get it. We all have to be really gentle with giving ourselves the space to process and detox this, the information as we learn it.
And moving forward with you, I know that you had started your podcast and that you're taking on clients. I don't even know, do you want to call them clients? Like you're helping these individuals that are coming to you. Yeah. How would somebody go about if they wanted to have a reading with you? Are you doing virtual meetings? Do they have to come ready to, is it like a therapy session, or do you intuitively know exactly what is needed at that time?
Yeah, I love that. I actually take it really case by case with every individual. And so I do readings remotely. I don't do them in person. That's actually like something that works best for me because, well, for two reasons. It's best for me because I'm completely in the zone. Like I'm eyes closed. I'm just, speaking like your soul's talking through me essentially and giving me the info. So I'm able to really get that stream of consciousness going that is harder, obviously, if someone's asking questions. So I make sure like beforehand, you tell me anything and everything that you would think I need to know. I don't ask for anything because I trust that what is given to me is all I need. And of course, I don't want to I don't want to ask too many questions and like for that I want it to be the most organic as possible, right? And not infiltrate, get my ego in the way by trying to answer questions because you told me something. Like I like to, let it be as pure as possible. And then the other reason why that's great is then you get a recording. So you get to keep the file and you can listen back in different places of, your journey after the fact. And they're usually pretty intense. Like I try to, spoil anyone who's coming to me with giving you as much as I can or as much as you need. And so, Yeah, I love doing them, but of course, it's a resonance thing, so I don't sell them ever. It's like if it feels on your heart to come to me, awesome. I have people reach out and then they'll, not get one, and then I'll hear from them later, and it's just about the time when it's right for them. So, yeah, I love to read. It's something it's not like the basis or bulk of my work that I do, but it's just a way for me to give that offers some insight, because a lot of us, again, like I mentioned earlier, are shut off from our ability to connect to God. So it's not me shortcutting that, relationship between you and God. It's me standing in the way as a channel to deliver that information. And through it, it's so fun. I love this because most people's souls will give them homework. They'll tell them, like, hey, you need to work on your throat chakra. Perfect. Elizabeth has a meditation for that. Or you need to start going and standing in the grass more often because your root chakra is really out of balance. Or maybe you need to separate yourself from this person for the time being of this project, if that resonates. And so it's kind of just messages like that that'll come through, and so it makes it a little bit more of an interactive experience, that you're not just being told, like, okay, your spirit guides say that your love life sucks, here's why, without saying how to fix it. So I love to be able to give practical information like that, which is kind of where me being a coach comes in.
Good to know. And you had said something when we were talking the other day about the fact that you don't even dabble in the idea of like predicting futures or telling people what to do. Can you explain that and why your reasoning is behind that?
Yes. So I think that's a very disconnected way to go about our growth and our journeys, because it's really focusing on outcome and not the experience. We didn't come here to just, achieve success. We came here to experience life. And that means we came here to take a really awesome nap on a day when we're tired. And that's part of our human experience. And then we also came here to find the love of our lives and have a ceremony with them if we want. So it's like, being a human is about so many different things, rather than just like, when am I going to have a kid, or when is this job going to come through? So I personally, like, my own beliefs about the future is that I just don't really value that as much, because that's not what life is about. If I tell you, and also for another reason, if I tell you, hey, you're going to be Oprah level or Oprah Winfrey level successful, and you're sitting here working at H&M, that is going to scare the crap out of you, because you're going to be like, how do I get there? Like, it doesn't really benefit us, I think, in really many ways. I think it can benefit us if someone is delivering a warning, like, hey, this month, be cautious, because, the energy might be really heavy and you might be feeling like emotionally lashing out. That's what we'll talk about the future. Or like on my podcast, I'll do energy predictions for the month, where I just say, August has potent energy for transformation, but that's not me saying, like, in August, your guys's, relationships are all going to fall apart, right? So I like to keep it vague like that. And then additionally, the future changes based on what you eat for breakfast. So you right now, for you example, Jordan, you have 12 options for today, say, or just as an example, you have 12 options for how the rest of your day could go. And tomorrow changes based on which of the 12 you choose. They'll ultimately lead you to the same place, but the order in which you get to that place in your journey, say 20 years from now, the order in which things happen, the pace at which things happen, all change based on one of the 12 options you pick for the rest of your afternoon after this episode. So that's where also it can lead to inaccuracy. And like, I don't want anyone to be putting expectations or hope into something that doesn't serve them, but to hear, hey, like, there's some energy from your relationship with your mom that is really hurting you, and your inner child needs love, and that love is going to help you with healthier partnerships in the future. That's useful. Like, that's something you can do something about and that you can learn from. So yeah, there's definitely readers out there who will do a lot of that. For me personally, I like to give soul messages more so.
Another question that just popped up into my mind is, ever since you kind of tapped into the gifts that you have and you've really focused on your spirituality, do you still struggle with your mental health?
Oh, I love that. Yes and no. So that's really cool for me. to have watched the evolution because I haven't eliminated everything. So, for example, eating disorders have been something I've struggled with like my whole life, and I still have disordered eating habits that happen now sometimes. But because on my spiritual journey and I'm connected to why I do things, like I know that my eating disorder actually comes from prenatal wounding I had in the womb, which you might hear that and be like, what the hell? Like, how does that even correlate? But I actually lost a twin in the womb, and that experience was so painful for me that in the womb, as a little baby soul, I decided that it wasn't worth it to be here anymore. And so throughout my life, I've manifested all these behaviors that have caused me to essentially sabotage my time while I'm here. And that also is so painful that I have eaten emotionally to soothe myself. And then I also have the learned programming around beauty standards, which, hello to everyone listening, and episodes you've had before, this is such a central theme for us as women. That also has caused me to have the opposite eating disorders of like the fasting and the occasional bulimia I've struggled with. And so I still will have some of those tendencies, but the beautiful part is now I know where they're coming from, and I now have tools to help myself that actually get me results aside from taking medications that numb me out or just struggling through it and then having a breakdown and getting really out of alignment. So when it comes to things like where I find myself wanting to eat to feel better, I talk to my inner child, or I'll take a bath and give myself a massage. And I'm just like, I love you. You're so amazing. You're such a radiant being. Yes, you're experiencing challenges right now. And that actually makes me feel better, because awareness is everything. The truth will set you free. When you know why your mental health issues are there in the first place, then you can be so much more empathetic to them, and you can also learn how and what they need, because each behavior that we experience from mental illness is coming from a place of not having any better tools in place. And that's what, therapists are great for giving us tools for. But the spiritual understanding is the why, because I would have never been able to work on my eating disorder if I hadn't known where that came from, that it was because I, had all this grief in my heart chakra that I've been carrying my entire life. So it's really helped me to find those missing pieces. So yes, I struggle, but nowhere near the same. And yeah, it's really beautiful for that reason. I think that's why a lot of people start their spiritual journey in the first place too, is because they're like, I'm depressed, I'm unhappy, I hate myself, and I need to take care of this.
Mm-hmm. So if somebody wanted to reach out to you and come in and actually have a reading, do they reach out via social media? Do you have a website? How do they go about doing that?
Yes, beautiful. So I have my Instagram that I always direct people there so that you can feel my energy first and see how I, jive with you. But I also have a booking link that you can book directly through that's in my Instagram bio. And I can also send you that individually too. And I have a 1-question reading that's just like one area of your life or one thing that you're needing guidance on. And then I have a full reading where I can kind of go into whatever you need, up to like an hour if you end up needing that.
Well, I'm sold. So I'm going to be booking my reading with you.
Yes, I would love
so
to
much
do that.
to dive into. Appreciate you taking so much time to come on and just explain everything that was on your heart. And I'm really encouraged by everything that I learned. And I hope that this is a really enlightening episode for everybody that's listening.
Me too. Absolutely. I think, we're all going through a lot of shifts right now. I mean, 2020 has such intense energy. So it's really about us all just reconnecting back with ourselves, being patient through these processes of questioning, breaking everything down. Because, we're looking into our government differently than before, into the whole thing. And just, creating space for these conversations and then being gentle for the things that come up around it. So I'm really grateful to have been here and to offer this for everybody.